You beat me to it.
That's my intention.
Nice.
Week one is to remember to record.
Right. Right.
No,
Mindfulness
my
recording.
intention goes beyond that, but welcome everybody. Hello,
Hey,
hello.
everybody.
Welcome, Jessica. Come on, Rena, Ange, Jordy. Hello, Amy, Susan. Lovely to see you. And always great to see you. Hello, Renee. Hello, David. Hi there, Bob. Big hug to you. Hello,
Ooh,
Debbie, Jennifer, Bridget.
Nicole's getting tea. I'm gonna have to ask about what kind of tea. Shouldn't have
Wonderful.
gotten me started, Nicole.
We'd have to skip ahead to week 5 and do the mindful tea drinking right now.
Yes. Ah, it's good.
Wonderful. Hey there, Stephanie. Welcome, Barbara. Hey, Renee. Hey, Janelle. Liz, Lynn, and Nicole. So good to see you. And I think we can go ahead and get started. We might have a couple more people trickling in.
Sweet. Let's do it. So we'll start the way that we start all of these, which is with a little bit of experiencing what we'll talk about today. And I think the delightful and very intentional choice that Brooke and I made was to actually have the landing practice of each time be quite similar. And so you probably noticed last week and the week before, it really was more or less around breath counting. And then, we got a little jazzy with it, which we'll do today too. But part of the idea here is like, this is a really simple practice you can do at any time, and you can flavor it in all sorts of different ways. You can kind of make it a contemplation or reflection on all sorts of different things. The breath is really dynamic that way. So let's do it. So if you're not already, you can get yourself situated in a comfortable, supportive seat. Sometimes I want to say like comfortable, but not too comfortable. But too comfortable is good too, as long as you don't fall asleep or get too tired. That was happening to me earlier today when I was meditating. So just take a moment, however you've decided to sit, to notice what your decision was. So make the way that you're sitting a choice. What muscles do I have tensed holding me up? Maybe you want to change that choice a little bit. I know I do. I was able to loosen my shoulders a little bit, loosen my hips a little bit. Maybe even your face. So funny, sometimes our mind thinks our face is a posture muscle holding our body up. Doesn't help that much to hold our body up, but it can hold our stress up pretty well. And in this more settled, relaxed body, perhaps starting to feel the weight of gravity pulling at you. Breathing whatever feels like a comfortable breath. Whatever breath feels most pleasing. Just what it's like to feel a sense of comfort, a sense of pleasure with your breath. Even if other things are feeling bad and you're bringing heaviness or stress today, normal, completely fine. But maybe you can still find an ounce of pleasure or comfort in your breath. Maybe there's something nice about your breath still. It's just that way. A pleasant breath will begin to count, just as we have before, counting on the exhales. 1, 2, just that way up to 10. Starting over at 10 or starting over if you forget where you were. Letting the breath be as comfortable as possible. You might notice as you're counting, there's your internal voice that's counting. For many of us, we'll also have an internal voice focused on all sorts of other things. Most of the time focused on what's going on later, what just happened, what's about to happen. Be playing or strategizing. So for a few more breaths, keep gently turning back to this count first. Just picking up where you left off, wherever you remember, or if you like going back to 1. Just pleasant. 5. I notice the less I talk, the more space there is for thoughts to pop in and pull you in one direction or another. No problem. You might even begin to intentionally bring some curiosity to what those thoughts are. Do your best to stay connected to this pleasant one breath at a time. But also see if you can just follow a thought and just listen without reacting or responding. Can you just hear your own internal thought? Just hear it. No need to respond. See if you can do that the next few thoughts that pop in. And maybe after you follow a few thoughts, you can come back to your breath. imagine you can hear these thoughts like a sound, just like my voice or your voice or somebody else's voice, Brooke's voice in a minute. What if your own thought was just like hearing a bird call? Taking a few more breaths, maybe counting backwards from 3 breaths, 2 breaths, 1 breath. And coming to a unceremonious but gentle close as you're ready. Let's see. What? Brooke, you might need to share your screen for a second. I have a random video playing from somewhere I can't find. One moment.
I got you. All righty. There we go. All right. So we're going to be heading into breakout rooms just for a moment. But what I'll invite you all to do is, so for today's session, we're going to be exploring mindfulness of thoughts and thinking, which for those of us living with type 1 diabetes or any type of diabetes, or closely related to somebody living with diabetes, my guess is you're quite familiar with your thoughts already, at least when it comes to your blood sugars, where they are, what happened recently in the past, and what could happen in the future, blood sugar wise. And so we're bringing curiosity to that thought stream today. And so what I'll invite you to do is grab a pen and paper if you have one nearby, or you could open up a blank Word document or note on your computer screen. And take a moment to note down a few of the thoughts that most frequently come up for you related to your diabetes. And Sam, if you'd like to go to the next slide, you can. What are some of the thoughts that you most frequently notice related to your diabetes? In a moment, we're going to head to breakout rooms. You'll be there for about 6 minutes with 1 or 2 additional community members. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what are the thoughts that most frequently come up for you related to your diabetes, and what physical experiences or senses tend to activate these thoughts. So for instance, for me, when I notice my breath becoming shallow, I'll immediately have a thought of, oh no, oh no, where are my glucose tablets? So try to name 2 or more sensations or experiences that tend to activate those thoughts for you. Another example could be like when you hear the sound of a CGM, right?
Mm.
What thoughts does that trigger? And then what are the impacts that these thought patterns have on your day-to-day life? So you might want to take a moment to write these 3 questions down. And when you're in your breakout groups, I'll invite the person with the shortest hair to share first about their experiences of thoughts. Bob, I'm looking at you and smiling as I say that. All right. So we'll see you in about 6 minutes. Enjoy your conversations. We're excited to hear from you when you come back. And Peter, I'm going to assign you to a room as well. There. Hey there, Amy. Welcome
Back,
back.
Sorry,
Amy.
I accidentally left my group.
Oh,
Put me
that's
back.
the worst. That's the
There's always
worst when that happens.
It's like I find the breakout room button is like whack-a-mole a little bit. So it's
Yes.
a good test of one's reflexes, and then you like press the button. It's like no.
Yeah. I'm having actually like I'll share a vulnerable thing, but we lost our dog a couple weeks ago, and my brain is just like not where it's supposed to be. She was always with me, and I just, I'm in that headspace of missing her.
Mm,
So yeah,
hard. Oh,
everything feels weird.
It's almost like, yeah, a loss like that. It's almost like, right, waking up without your left hand or something.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
so
sorry.
sorry to hear that, Amy.
Yeah.
Mm.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. So now I hope you had a good conversation with your breakout partners. I'm going to drop in the chat a link to a little poll that we'd like for each of you to submit. And just in like 1 or 2 words, what thoughts do you frequently have related to diabetes?
And hint here about the 1 to 2 words. PoleEV sometimes doesn't take separate words. So Brooke and I don't know exactly how it's going to work. But if you make everything 1 word, if you have more than 1 word in what you put in, then it'll show up that way. So that's another strategy. But you could also give multiple words a go.
We might end up with just one very large the in the
Yeah.
middle.
Weirdly, everybody had articles in their thoughts.
Yeah.
Good grammar. Everybody's thoughts have good grammar.
All right. I see your responses coming in.
Mm, yeah. Mm.
Mm. Yeah, I see frustration that stands out. So tired of this. I hate this. Anxiety, annoyance, irritation, feeling barriers. Feels like it's all we do. What do I need to do? Yeah. Yeah. These are all valid thoughts. I'm curious for those of you, especially coming out of your breakout conversations and seeing kind of these collective thoughts related to diabetes, some of these thoughts that we may share. What do you notice in terms of your thoughts related to diabetes? And particularly, what senses or experiences tend to provoke these kinds of thoughts?
Anybody can feel free to jump in. You can also use the chat like we have before.
It was interesting to see all those words together. Frustration came up in our group a lot, as well as all the negative aspects. And the only time gratitude came up was the fact that we had said when we think about diabetes and our relationship in those moments when we're really reminded of diabetes, we don't think, oh, yes, like I'm so grateful I have diabetes. So it was interesting to see that someone did put gratitude into their word share. It's a reminder of the overall picture, I suppose.
Mm. Mm.
I love that. So for all of us, there are some thoughts that may tend to be the loudest or the sort of the record that gets played the most often. And also there can be these maybe quieter whispers that come up, like the whisper of gratitude related to our diabetes. Yeah.
And I was going to say that I've been type 1 for 46 years. So I spent many years beating myself up about, well, just what we all go through, like just concerns about your blood sugars. Some days are great, some days aren't, and you just don't know why. But in the last few years, I've learned to be more curious and more like, okay, I had a rough day yesterday. What can I learn from that? Like, I might need to, even when I became first type 1, it was all pen injection, but there was flexibility in how you gave your insulin. And so, and I find that it's even more so if you have a CGM and, and a pump, right? So it's just adjusting and being curious about what's happening to your body. That's sort of
And
so
I'm
that fit in with the thankful part.
And Susan, I'm curious for you, what impact do you notice that thought or that way of relating to your diabetes related experiences having on you? What impact does it have when you,
yeah, that's a good question. It actually makes me more secure, makes me feel better about myself, right? Because I think, depending on what happened to you when you were diagnosed, I was told that I would be blind and I would be in kidney failure within 20 years of being a type 1 diabetic. And then, when I became 40, I was told that I would probably have a stroke by the time I was 60. Well, I'm past 60. And so I had that weight on my shoulders all that time, which was very stressful. And I just find now I don't carry that weight anymore because, whatever happens to my body is I've done the best I can. And I just need to be curious and thankful that, and do the best that, I can in the moment. So it just makes me feel more relaxed, I think.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I love that. I can hear it in the sound of your voice. It's just that like, can put it down. I can put the weight of those fears, those anxieties.
Yeah, because I can't imagine not being a diabetic. I mean, I was, 19 years old when I became a diabetic. And so I've lived my whole life with it. So it's just, and in our group, we were also talking about, thankfulness and just, looking at it in a different way sometimes.
Mm.
I love that. A great highlight of too, the power that we have to choose our thoughts or to bring curiosity to, like, oh, what would it be like if I met this moment in this way, as opposed to maybe what my typical automatic reaction or response would be. Yeah. How about one more person? What thoughts do you most frequently notice coming up around your diabetes, and what impacts do they have?
Also want to
in your group.
for everyone this comment that Jordy just made as well, which really fits in nicely with what Susan was just mentioning of kind of having both ends of it of yeah, there are the difficulties and there's the frustrations with the tech and why isn't this better, and it feels unfair, and also, wow, I'm doing this. Yeah. It's really not easy what any of us do, it wouldn't be easy even if we weren't doing that much. And we're all doing a lot. Even the best of lives is difficult. We have a added flavor of difficulty in ours.
I want to, I
Sorry.
just wanted to share the notion of beginning again, which I feel like I've been picking up from doing the meditation, like that whole notion of like beginning again. And there's a way that it sort of like clears things, you know, that we always have that opportunity to begin again. And it sort of stops some of the ponderings, like, what did I do wrong? Or, you know, something of that sort. I can stop it there and just sort of say, okay, let's begin again. You know, and that's actually been very, very helpful for me. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. Karen, I see your hand raised. And Debbie, I think I saw you about to come off mute, so we'll come to you next.
Okay, I'm thinking about the quality of renewal that it brings, because it's always like that expression, starting from Jump Street. It's an old expression, like from the 20s, I think, but it's like starting at the beginning again. And sometimes it feels very weary, or, to be starting again and again, but yet there's something about it that is just a new opportunity each time. And that feels helpful for me.
Just a little humor real quick. Oh, did I jump the gun?
Go ahead, Bob.
Go for it. Go for it.
Sorry, just came into my head. Just a little humor that you put us in a room with 3 guys, which for me is unusual, and it's usually females. But we had a whole contest on who had the shortest hair.
I have to get the tape measure.
I won.
Nice.
Awesome. I love
Debbie,
that.
what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna, we talked a lot in our group about the anxiety around the skin irritations and the technology beepings and things like that, which is less gratitude and more complaining. But I think the nuances of those things that really occupy a lot of our brain space per day, of just constantly thinking about how they're, how our skin is reacting, how our beeping is being portrayed in a room with other people, and just the constant anxiety around those 2 things.
Yeah. That's also just such a nice segue into what we're talking about today. And I really want to dive in from that, Debbie. So thank you. Because there's 2 components, or at least that I'm hearing from that. There is the like, wow, like my skin is irritated, this sucks. At best it's, itchy and uncomfortable. At worst, there's some bigger concern with the skin irritation or rash. And then there's the thoughts about that stuff. And sometimes we kind of think of it all as one thing. And that's when it gets really rough, is when it just tumbles us around, and it's this mess, this glob that we're in that we can't separate. But part of what we're talking about today is actually there are 2 different things. And though, naturally we won't always feel that it's that way, we can learn to start to separate those 2 out and just see, okay, there's an uncomfortable feeling here. I'm having an uncomfortable experience, and I'm having thoughts about that uncomfortable experience. And oddly, the thoughts sometimes make it even more uncomfortable, or they lead me to conclusions about what experience I'm having. So, of course, we're already there. We're talking about thoughts, talking about the mind. And sometimes we don't think about it in these terms. And again, I'm repeating some things that those of you who've watched the video for this week will have already seen. But one really useful frame, whether or not you feel it's true, it's a useful frame to try on all the time, and especially at times when we feel really grabbed by thoughts, or we feel really like stuck, like they're sticking onto us like burrs, or something else uncomfortable, is that this is just another sense. So when we did the practice at the beginning, our landing practice, we tried to pay attention to our thoughts as if it was a sound that we were hearing. And you could also have visual thoughts. You could have thoughts of all different kinds. So you could do the same for all of these. Just paying attention for a moment as if this is something that's coming externally that I would normally think of as, oh, that has nothing to do with me. I'm just experiencing it, but that's not a result of me. So sometimes we think of our thoughts as something that we own or that defines us. And maybe there's some ways that that's true. They're really close to us. We live with them all the time. They relate to our identity in significant ways, but we also don't have full control over them. And so using this as a frame and saying, hey, this is another sense. And there is also a reality to this, is that we're often just receiving the thoughts. We're just experiencing thoughts. We're not so often creating our everyday thoughts. And if you don't believe me, you can try sometime when you're struggling with your thoughts. You could say, hey, these are my thoughts. I'm going to control it and see how it works. It doesn't work very well. So much more useful often to say, okay, this is like an uncomfortable feeling, or this is like a sound that I don't like. Something of that nature. And so those thoughts can come in any sort of form, and they might be triggered, as we're already talking about, by all sorts of different stimuli. And so, for example, I think alarms were mentioned. We might first start by hearing the sound of an alarm, and then all of a sudden there's some recognition. The alarm in and of itself, I mean, let's be honest, most of those alarm sounds are horrible. And I know that my partner definitely agrees about that. For anybody who has a partner that also hears your pump or Dexcom sounds, shout out to them for having to hear those and still loving us. So it is uncomfortable, even at this stage, maybe. But the really uncomfortable part, I think most of us can agree, is knowing what that sound means. And sometimes that sound means I've done something wrong, or I'm a failure, or sometimes it means, this is going to lead to some complication, or this is going to limit me from doing something that I want to do. And so it's that second level, and it's not to say that there's not a reality there. If I have a low blood sugar, it's a reality. I might need to stop what I'm doing. So it's not false for me to think, okay, this is going to really impact my day in a way that I don't like. But it's also me jumping ahead to the next step and predicting, what's the experience that I'm going to have in 20 minutes because of this sound that I just heard. And so we jump to a certain experience and we start having these feelings based on something that we've heard. But it really is because of something that we've thought. So that's a really interesting way to pay attention, and definitely recommend you take a look at this in your everyday life when you feel that something is upsetting, whether it's diabetes related or not, to take a moment and reflect on what thoughts you're having about it. Because most of the time, the direct stimulus is not the most uncomfortable or upsetting part. It's what it ends up meaning to us, how we end up understanding it. So it's really good to take a look at what are those thoughts.
And if I could jump in and add something to this, it's interesting to notice too, what happens to those thoughts or emotions that really automatically get spurred by stimuli, say a CGM alarm, when you don't add anything to them. Without the like, again, or I knew I shouldn't have eaten that. I knew I should have bolused differently. And just to notice without any reinforcement, what happens to that thought or emotion. For the most part, thoughts and emotions, if unsustained by additional thoughts, reactions, judgments, will pass within 60 to 90 seconds. Right? So even the act of simply noticing the thought or the emotion as it arises, as if it were like a cloud passing over you in the sky, in many ways can remove some of the fire, or it's like instead of heaping the coals onto the thought or emotion, just watching it burn out on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's this question of how do we do that, right? Because of course it sounds amazing, but that's what we're practicing for here. And it's not necessarily so natural of a reflex. This is why so many of us find meditation uncomfortable. I was just talking to Brooke. We were supposed to meet this morning and I had a half-day retreat, so I wasn't available to meet. And Brooke was like, "How was it?" And I was like, "It was terrible. Oh my gosh, I was having such uncomfortable and self-judgmental thoughts the whole time." And I was sleepy. That didn't help. But this is how it is. This is how it is. It's a hard practice sometimes to just face our thoughts and realize, wow, I have no control of these uncomfortable thoughts. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just sit there and watch them, but also to use your breathing, to count your breaths. And there's some really helpful mantras that we'll also kind of talk about in the next few weeks. Not magical or spiritual mantras per se, but reminders to ourselves, things we can say to ourselves to remind us of the way that things are. So counting breath, giving words of affirmation or of reality, paying attention to our body. These are ways that we can let those thoughts start to pass in the way that Brooke was talking about. So I'm going to fly through this, but you can also get a little bit more of this in the video for the week. So, okay, how does this actually work? How do we go from this stage to this stage? Actually, how do we go from this stage to this stage to this stage? I won't claim that this is the only truth or the only way that this works, but it's a really good, helpful model, and it's one that you can actually look at with your own experience. And so we'll explore this a little bit with some of the practices and with our closing practice today. And I definitely recommend you try some of these things on your own. It's also something that people have been doing for thousands of years and thought, hey, this actually seems to make sense and be helpful to look at it this way. So how does our mind spin? How do we end up getting to that place? Well, we start at the beginning with some sort of stimulus. And maybe we start when we're meditating, so we're being so mindful at the beginning. No judgment, just paying attention to my breath, and I know what number I'm on. And then all of a sudden, an uncomfortable feeling in our body. Maybe it's something that tells us our blood sugar is high, for example. Let's use that. And so we have this first experience, and this is like this part. It's just the initial taste, just the initial idea. Okay, something's going on here. I don't know what it is yet. I don't have a meaning for it. But as your body starts to recognize that something's going on here, it starts to draw some conclusions immediately, even before you're cognitively aware of this. And this is actually known from neuroscience too, that we start to feel things often before we become conscious of what they mean or what we think about them. So these are those feeling tones. And feeling tones doesn't mean, angry, happy, sad, not those kinds of feelings, but feeling tones is just as simple as this feels good, this feels bad, or this doesn't really feel quite like either, something in the middle. So it's really interesting to notice how this manifests in your body. And we were doing this a little bit already today, noticing what's pleasant about the breath. Or noticing a positive feeling tone. Can do the same thing for negative feeling tones. Okay, so we start to have this negative feeling tone. Oh, feels like a high blood sugar. I haven't even recognized that yet, but something feels off, something feels bad. Okay, now I'm starting to recognize high blood sugar. I know what this is. My mouth is dry. I'm feeling dehydrated. I'm feeling sluggish. Whatever it is that we've initially noticed. And now we're into the labeling zone. And as soon as that happens, we start off on this well-worn path of us reacting to that same thing many times. And so we're no longer doing that thing that Karen was talking about earlier, that kind of refreshing or seeing things anew. And it wasn't just Karen, a couple people mentioned this, but we're no longer doing that anymore at this point. As soon as we start to recognize or label it, we often start down this well-worn path of, oh, once again, I didn't give myself enough insulin, or I ate too much for this low blood sugar, whatever it is. And we get in our story. And that has all sorts of reactions. We actually create thoughts that way. And so more thoughts are created. And you could start those back from here. Those thoughts end up feeling bad. And you start all over again from the start. We might have some physical reaction, rage bolusing, if you're me. Many of us do that. So that might be a physical reaction that manifests itself. And then we start to get even deeper into our story and say, oh man, of course, this always happens to me because I suck at this. I'm not good at this. Or I can't do this for this reason. I'm not cut out for this. Whatever it is. And maybe it's all of these things. And so then we spin, and that feels bad. And so we go back to the beginning and we have this bad feeling, and we start to recognize and label that and say, oh, now I'm spinning again. And it goes on and on. It's very difficult to break out of that. The beauty of this is that each of these can be a call for us to pay attention. Oh, I'm feeling really bad. Oh, I'm having really negative thoughts. Oh, I've just rage bolused again. Okay, let's pay attention to what's going on here. Forget about all the judgment for just a second. Maybe we can go back to that later if we really want to. But for a second, let's suspend the judgment and just see what's going on here. What's happening? And we start to slow down and detach these things from each other. So they're all still there. They don't disappear, but they don't just become automatically linked to each other. And our awareness grows to actually encompass all of them. Now, of course, this doesn't happen right away, and it doesn't happen all the time. But if we are able to break the cycle at any point and say, wait a second, this is calling me to pay attention. To pay attention to our breath, pay attention to our thoughts, the feelings in our body. This mindful awareness can start to grow. And all of a sudden, one thing doesn't need to lead to the next. Doesn't make the situation sweet all of a sudden. It can still be a really shitty situation. Pardon my French. It'll still be a very difficult situation. But it's not getting worse and worse by us spiraling into our own thoughts and patterns and behaviors. I want to lead a practice, but I want to just stop for a moment because that was a lot of talking time. So if you want to just stand up and shake out for a second, I think I actually am going to do that. I can even lead us in a shakeout, but you don't have to do what I'm doing. But I'm definitely going to be shaking out and stretching. Oh. If you have anything that feels like it needs to be said or asked now, you can also do that.
I'll just add to reground into what we've been talking about since week 1. All of these experiences, whether they be sensations in the body, feeling tones, thoughts and thinking judgments, creating a sense of self or identity around our experiences, all of those can be anchors, as Sam mentioned, to bring us back to help us retain our retention, to help us remember to come back to our intention, right? So as Sam said, it's not so much that, right, automatically when we have the awareness, we feel better, but it can be a recognition of like, wow, this is hard. I don't want to feel like this right now. Let me lean into my intention to be patient with myself. And that even just being able to use those as the touchstones to bring ourselves back to that intention, not only strengthens our mindful awareness, our mindfulness muscle, it also disrupts those neural pathways that reinforce those automatic thought patterns, reactions, and habits as well. So Sam, you shared the example of rage bulicing. That for me was a automatic habit for many years. And just that noticing, having just a moment to recognize, like, I don't feel well and I want to feel better fast, opened up the space for me to actually choose what I wanted to do next, rather than just having my automatic kind of pilot kick in, which is like the pathway in my brain that requires the least energy, the least decision making. And so again, it's all of these experiences can bring us back to our intention of how we want to be with our experiences and with ourselves, no matter what's going on.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Brooke. Okay. Let's do a short, long practice. By that, I mean, it was supposed to be a long practice, but we won't take all that time. So we'll do some practice. While we're doing this practice, you can look at this wonderful place. Is this Southern California, Brooke?
This is Mendocino, California. So Northern California.
Pretty. So let's practice. So we can begin, if you're sitting down, just the same way that we did our landing practice, paying attention to a moment to how you're seated. Letting your postural muscles do some work, but letting everything else rest a little bit more. How are you holding your neck? How are you holding your face, your hands, your feet? Soften. You keep your body a little bit softer like this. It can be easier to notice what happens when you have a feeling or thought that you don't like. Things tighten up, and then you can get a chance to soften again. But before that, without skipping ahead, just begin to breathe again, and breathe in a pleasant way, just as we did before, whatever that means for you now. Don't breathe in a special way. Just breathe in a you way right now. Discover the perfect breath for yourself right now. There'll never be the perfect breath again. Just this once. This is the right way for you to breathe, whatever feels right. Doing this, notice what feels good about your experience. So we're starting with those feeling tones. Lean into what feels nice, what feels good about this. And see if you can get specific here. What is it that feels good? Is it the smooth passage of air through your body? Is it a general feeling of relaxation and muscles that were tense before? Is it a happy rising feeling in your head? A warm feeling in your heart? Maybe it's even more subtle. Maybe you can't place it. That's okay. Just being curious. What is it that feels good right now? And without losing that completely, that perspective is there for you. Switch back to it at any time. Just like putting a different pair of sunglasses on. But now you can put the lenses on of what feels bad right now. What doesn't feel so good? This could be something minor or subtle. For me, my forehead feels uncomfortable. Maybe I can gently relax it a little bit, but it still feels uncomfortable. For you, it could be your shoulders or your leg, or maybe it's a strained feeling in your heart, sadness of some kind. But even before the sadness, just the feeling. What does that feel like? Can you just gently touch what feels uncomfortable, what feels bad? Just hang with it a moment, one gentle breath at a time. Maybe the center of what feels bad now is thoughts. There's some disturbing or upsetting thoughts. Trying to just hear them like we did before, but also notice, how do I know that it feels bad? What is it about this that makes it feel bad? Not with thoughts, just with feelings. Hold it all inside your gentle breathing. Your breathing, which continues long after these bad feelings or thoughts go away, which started long before these bad feelings or thoughts started. Notice your mind racing to name the good and name the bad. It's an excellent function of a healthy mind. Good to just notice. Ah, I'm naming things, I'm labeling, I'm recognizing. Might even feel a pull to react to your thoughts or feelings. Maybe to push certain things away, or to divert your mind from them, to distract yourself, or to move. Notice that for just a moment. And let go of all of it. For a few moments, no practice. You can just sit there. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. Giving yourself that grace for a few seconds. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. As you're ready, take some deeper breaths. Begin to make some small movements. And come back visually as well. Close with this quote from about 1400 years ago of a meditation teacher, just reminding us, what is this all about? Why are we here doing this, sitting here, listening to our thoughts, trying to break those cycles? There is a positive, healthy, sweet voice that we all carry. And the more that we can clean ourselves and start to break those chains of thought patterns, you can start to hear that sweet voice come through a little bit more. And we'll work with that even more next week. So it brings the session to an official close, but Brooke and I will be here to hang out. If anybody has any thoughts or questions or wants to share anything about that, we can hang out a few minutes longer. But if you have to go, feel free to depart, as we are after the time. So yeah, if you want to stay and have a sharing time, that's delightful. If you have to go, also delightful. Ah, yes. I left out the most important part, homework.
Homework. So your take-home practices for this week, as an informal practice, we encourage you to choose just one aspect or activity related to your diabetes that you do every day. So this could be checking your blood sugar reading, dosing your insulin, changing your infusion set, carb counting for a meal, and bring attention to what you're thinking as you're doing that activity. And then silently note each of those thoughts as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. There's nothing you need to do with the thoughts, but simply noticing them and becoming aware of the feeling tone that they carry. And then you'll find a couple of guided meditation recordings as well on the course website on feeling tones and thoughts as well. But you're welcome to explore any other practices centered around kind of bringing mindful awareness to thoughts and thinking. And with that, thank you all. Phantom the cat, thanks you all for your diligent practice. Tonight she'll be our guest facilitator next week as well. Oh,
Phantom is the ultimate meditator.
right. Thank you all so much. We'll hang on for a few more minutes in case anybody has questions or would like to debrief.
Brooke, I had a quick question.